Warm welcome, Ajahn. Ajahn, you're on mute. The microphone is on mute.
Am I audible now?
Super audible.
Okay, that's very good.
So
okay,
wonderful.
Namaste, everybody.
Namaste, Ajahn. So wonderful to see you. We'd all like to bow to you, Ajahn, from wherever we are. So please allow us that.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I'll have to see first a little bit like whether I can get the view that I see everybody. Gallery view, okay. But like I'd like to see you on the other screen. I should have come a little earlier, so I don't have to wait with the technicalities. Hello, everybody. Anish is there as well, and Deepti and Dr. Da. Oh, and Bharti and Hari. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I still am struggling a little bit with the technique. I'm just trying to arrange that I can see at least some of you while talking. I think it's good enough. So this is the first time I'm doing a Dhamma talk with people connected online, and I'd first of all like to casually say I appreciate very much to be able to communicate the Dhamma in this way. And I know all of you are probably in a setting of lockdown and setting of like being at home. And I hope this will give a little bit of an encouragement for all of you to not lose heart and practice diligently in these special conditions. I think you're very diligent already with meeting frequently online. And I hear like sometimes in Hindi, like I tapped into some of the YouTube things, but I didn't understand much, so I left it. And but now this will be just like we are used to in English, and be able to. Do you have any recommendations for myself before I start with the official talk?
Yes, yes, Ajahn, of course, not recommendations, but I think just in terms of session flow. So first of all, I'd like to, I'm very glad to share that we have participants from Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, as well, apart from India, and possibly some other nationalities also.
That's very good.
So people are very much keen and willing to hear the Dhamma from you. And for many of us, it's also the first time. I'd take an opportunity to talk a little bit about yourself and introduce you to the group. So if you could give me a few moments, and then after that, we'd make a request for the Dhamma talk, and then followed by Q&A session.
Wonderful. Excellent. That's very nice.
So I formally say namaste and welcome to Ajahn and to everyone who's joining us today on behalf of Aranya Vihar Trust in India. We have with us Venerable Ajahn Kevali, who's the current abbot of the International Monastery in Thailand by the name Wat Pa Nanachat, or Nanachat as it is often called. Nanachat is an international Buddhist monastery that provides English-speaking people the opportunity to become Buddhist monks in the traditional way of the Thai forest tradition. Ajahn was born in Germany in 1968, and we saw that he joined just in the nick of time, not late by even 1 second. So that's what his German upbringing brings with him. When he was about 30 years of age, he was ordained as a novice monk in Nanachat. And after a year, he was fully ordained as a bhikkhu by respected Lumpur Liam, who is the abbot of Wat Pa Pong, the monastery set up by Lumpur Cha. Thereafter, in 2014, Ajahn was given his monk's title by the King of Thailand to be, if I can pronounce it correctly, I'll attempt that, Phra Kru Ubon Bhavna Vitet.
Yes.
Thank you. So he's been the abbot of Wat Pah Nanachat since 2007. And his predecessors in this role have been the likes of Ajahn Sumedho, Ajahn Jayasaro, Ajahn Pasanno, and others. He has maintained the standards of Vinaya, which keeps Nanachat as an attractive monastery for serious practitioners. So a heavy recommendation for all of us to visit whenever we can. This itself is a huge responsibility, we know, Ajahn, and you've spared your time. And upon that, you also formally agreed to be the patron of Aranya Vihara Trust. We are so grateful for that. So Ajahn has visited us at Dhamma Rama, the meditation center in New Delhi, and his guidance has been of tremendous benefit for us for the conduct of laymen and women in the presence of monks and nuns, how to run a meditation center suitable for Vinaya-keeping monastics to offer teachings. We have Ajahn's blessings and motivation to set up a forest monastery in India when the time is right. Search for an appropriate land is on. Ajahn has been with us on one such pursuit. It is to his credit that the first managing trustee of Aranya Vihar Trust, Mr. Arpan Sharma, is now in orange robes as a bhikkhu in Thailand. We have so much to be grateful for, Ajahn. And today, you've been very gracious to allow us an opportunity to offer a Dhamma talk on the practical aspects of the teachings on Anatta. So I would request our managing trustee, Mr. Anish Goel, to please make a formal request to respected Ajahn for Dhamma Desna.
Sure, whether I can see him.
Brahma cha lokadipati sahampati Katanjali anadivaram ayachatha santidha satta parajaka jatika dese tu dhammam anukampimam pajam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami ito parang sakachang dhammo sotapoti. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be able to start this way of teaching on this afternoon, Sunday afternoon, in distancing to each other, but like hopefully in the Dhamma we can connect and we can share heartfelt feelings that don't rely on technology and on screens, but like communicating something which is beyond our personal inner world, like beyond our personal formal world, and is beyond the sense of like this is like Ajahn Kevali speaking, but like I hope that it can communicate a sense of Dhamma. And the topic I chose for today was some practical aspects of Anatta, the teaching on non-self or no-self, or I like to also say selflessness, because this resonates very much with some of the aspects that I try to practice in my own life. I'm trying to take it down to a daily life experience, to practice not being selfish, for example. This is one aspect of the teachings of Anatta in practice. And when we start from this, like from the aspect of the normal ethical behavior that we need to all have as Buddhists, then it's already many times challenging. It's challenging to a sense of ego, a sense of self, a sense of pride, sense of who we are, to renounce things, to be able to sacrifice for other people, and to be able to be good to other people when possibly other people aren't good to us sometimes. We have to then let go of the sense of pride, identification, the sense of like holding on to what we are, who we are, and how we'd like to be. So that flexibility, I think, is a basic attitude that all of us need and all of us are trying to develop in various aspects. And we know the gradual training, it starts usually with dana, and then sila, in order to have a foundation in good practices, in the things that we do by body, speech, and of course mind, being engaged with our sense of practice while we're acting, while we're speaking. This is very, very tangible many times when we do things in our daily lives, and when we do things in our work or in a social context. Then to be stepping back from the sense of I'm doing this for me, I'm doing this because I want it. But sometimes, like on a conventional sense, we have to then use the form of like, I'm called like this and this is my job. For example, I was a bit embarrassed to hear the introduction about my engagement with Aranya Vihara. I would say, no, this is not me. It's just something I feel we train ourselves in to take on responsibility in the context of what is Dhamma, and also in the context of what is Vinaya. Vinaya, as you know, for the monks is very important. It's a sense of discipline, rules, or conventions. And this directly relates to how we practice with ethical conduct, for example. In Sila, for the monks, it's very precise. Many times they are defined by specific circumstances, and they are very, say, kind of like centered on a tangible reality, whereas the Dhamma generally is more open, free, and has that sense of like boundlessness, and as we know, a very natural feeling to it. Whereas the sense of Vinaya, the sense of conventions, where we act as persons, where we do good and bad deeds, is a sense of like being defined, being conventionally, say, conditioned. We're in the conditioned world, and we may have a certain name, a certain biography, certain habits and tendencies that we surely study well over the time of our practice, and we use them well. But eventually, all of this will have to let go, and all of this will have to be showing that we're not attached to it. When we get into trouble, when we get into pain, when we get older, when we face death, it's one of the contemplations that we frequently do, that the sense of all that was constructed in our life actually may not be that relevant anymore, even though some of us possibly have very, very good biographies to share, to write, and there will be nice obituaries about every one of us, I'm very sure, because we've done a lot of useful, good things. But eventually, actually, they are gone. the sense of what was my life and what was I in this life is not relevant after some time, even for the contemporaries. And I was looking at some photos the other day because I was giving a little talk in the school of our village, Bungwai, and I thought it would be good actually just to show them a few pictures of who I was in the time before I ordained, because it's quite exotic somehow, I believe, for the kids, farmer kids in northeast Thailand, to see, like, say, kind of like an average German guy on his bicycle or with his guitar, or in a city which looks like a fairy tale maybe. And while looking through these pictures, I actually had a strong feeling, actually this person doesn't exist anymore. I'm not claiming anything now supernatural or so, but like it's just basically a kind of slightly puzzling experience to look at oneself in pictures as a kid, or look at oneself in pictures as like an adolescent, or somebody who's like studying or like building up his whole identity. And as a school student or as a university student later, I definitely had a lot of like attributes that I wanted to be associated with. And it's very, very strange to see them now, from having changed my lifestyle quite a bit. I eventually didn't end up showing those pictures because I felt it was too far away from something that I could actually bridge to those kids in Bungwai, like, and in our village, to show pictures from this other world. Like, it's almost like an extraterrestrial speaking somehow. So I was thinking more like in terms of how to make people really relate to that. Actually, we're not really who we think we are. We're actually not really who we identify with. And how to do that, how to get a little bit of that feeling of embarrassment, of like when we're pinned down to who we're supposed to be, or who we kind of have constructed around us. And that feeling is, I think, a very practical aspect of Dhamma practice, where we relate to the liberating part of the teachings of Anatta directly. This may be just coming up casually or unsolicited every now and again. And I can imagine that it's very difficult to create it, to want to not feel identified. That's almost impossible. And it's also not something that we can bring about by, say, studying the theory about Anatta. But I think there are many moments in all our lives where we suddenly feel actually dispatched from all the conditions around our name, studies, background, or like identity. And to feel these with a heart of like, what a relief. I don't have to be anybody. What a relief. I can just be normal. What a relief. I can just be natural. I think this is a bit like what our teachers in the forest tradition, like Rinpoche maybe, of course we know about him, we've heard some of the teachings. I think that's what many times was the particular special quality that people could sense with Rinpoche, or like teachers that are very, very open in their practice and very advanced in the development of Anatta, is the sense of like, here's somebody who is actually not fixed to something. Can't really pin him down. Is he like this or is he like that? It could also be a she, of course, like by conventions. A being that is like not kind of like making a sense of, let's put it like that, like a sense of show around himself or herself, but being just simply there, present, and having an openness towards the situations. And I believe that these are the things that like make our practice like really flourish and make our like say relation to the Dhamma become alive when we try to keep touch with a sense of this letting go inwardly. And my feeling is that outwardly, by doing our duties in daily life, for example, being somebody who is on time or like somebody who does his job correctly, passes some exams if necessary, or says the right thing at the right moment. I think these tasks, they get easier for us when we don't invest that sense of it's me doing it. And this really counts for me, but like we're just doing it like in a relaxed way, in a way of letting go. So practical aspects, how to not get caught up with one's sense of this is me, this is myself, this is about me, is of course like much in what we do in meditation. We sit down and try to just simply be by closing our eyes, dropping the duties, not talking, and even inwardly stopping to say kind of reiterate thoughts about what has been happening and what is supposed to happen. But we just simply slow down and let things be, and like trying to focus on the actual experience rather than the comments and the constructions around the experiences. So that's like, of course, like one of the main factors where we train ourselves to get access to this sense of being at ease with things as they arise and cease, without investing the identity or say, manipulating them into what is supposed to be in there for us. So the sense of like I'm just letting things happen, and all of us like skilled meditators, we reserve a lot of time for sitting in meditation, and we have certain ways of approaching a mind that lets go and doesn't get drawn towards the particulars of our particular situation also, but like experience the present occurrences of whatever happens in a fresh and new way. We have ways of opening up to that. And in Thailand, we use many times the word Buddho as a meditation word. Like we just remind ourselves of just simply being the witness, one can say, or the one who knows. And not so much like emphasizing the word the one who knows, but like more like in Lumpur Sumedho's phrase, like being the knowing, like living the knowing, experiencing the knowing. And rather than, again, like creating a feeling of like, this is me doing this, but just more or less immersing oneself into the power of an experience by itself. So we all have experience with that, and this is of course one aspect of the practice towards anatta, of being able to let go, at least for a certain period of time, to let go of one's wishes, identifications, and constructions around what should be, what am I. And sometimes we have certain reminders of that, like that come back when we actually are involved with activities, that because we have experienced feelings like that in a miniature laboratory situation while we're sitting already, and then they come up in a situation where we are really bound up with our activities, with our social context, and we possibly able to come back to that experience of, at least for short times in our meditation, having let go and having been sitting peacefully in a conditioned context, in a moving context. So sometimes we have these very intuitive moments of suddenly collecting back. And I do think the more we like emphasize that we actually like to be in a space that is that open and not centered around ourselves as a person, the easier it comes back to us in various, actually very unlikely situations. Many times I do have like situations where I actually really have to react quickly, or I bet all of us, like, we're bound up with jobs and with like organizing things, and some things really go wrong every now and again, and not the way we planned them. And then just a little sense of actually going back to the Dhamma, saying, this is not me, this is not about me, this is not, I don't have to invest myself in there. I can just let things go their natural way. And I've done my job already. I've, like, by conventions, I've given my input. Now's the time just to let go, and now's the time just to let things be. I think many times when we're really cornered with like stressful situations, actually we have to let go. Actually, they actually teach us, like, when we fully face that challenge and dukkha, sometimes there's no way. A bit like, I think that's like one of the things Ajahn Chah said to Luang Por Sumedho: where do you go when you can't go to the front, to the left, to the right, up and below? Where do you go? So at least that's one of the famous stories. Like, I think it was in England that Luang Por Chah really put Luang Por Sumedho on the spot with that. And what it means is, like, okay, there are impossible situations. We can't be the perfect manager of a situation like that. So we just have to drop it. And then usually, amazingly, we relax, and then there's a new aspect that comes up, and the situation unfolds in a very, very neat way without us, like, kind of like actually pushing it. So it's not just potluck, it's that disposition to letting things happen and taking oneself out of the picture. So these are like a bit, like, I think, known to us already from our meditation background, and a lot of say practice is evolving around this, like to be simply present and not do it according to plans, techniques, goals, aims, and not even to be visible with the practice. Sometimes it's a very nice idiom in Thailand to say to put gold leaves on the back of the Buddha. So to do things like silently, like without being, I say, kind of even noticed for that. And because actually what matters is the experience that we have. And it doesn't matter whether other people see it, of course. That would be counterproductive, actually. So it's much more like an inner connection that we build up to being able to swap into a mode of not having to be anything special. And then we can do that deliberately. That then comes in all these things about sila, about our duties, that, like, where we practice what I mentioned at the beginning, selflessness, like in a more general, colloquial way that the word is used. Like, say, for example, I was brought up, like, as a Christian, and there's a lot of emphasis of doing good deeds and charity and so forth. And if you ask a Christian, basically they would say selflessness is about benevolent deeds of loving kindness and not taking advantage for oneself, not to exploit a situation for selfish reasons, not to be egoistic, for example, to share and to be aware of what other people need, for example. So these are, of course, also very much parts of our practice. When we practice dana, when we practice generosity, when we practice sila, just to do things keeping in mind that there are other people around, other beings around, and that they also feel just like we feel, that we could put ourselves in their shoes and they could put themselves in our shoes, that we're kind of interchangeable almost, that we practice then not to take advantage for ourselves. Like, say, when we get the chance to cut the corners, or like have like some privilege or so, just to naturally let that pass, and have somebody else get the bigger piece of chocolate. Also, this is an example from monastic life. Monks actually quite push towards like showing their attachments to tiny little pleasures, and they become a real big thing. But we all know that experience of like letting go of a certain special privilege and having it shared with somebody else, or giving it up to somebody else, how happy that makes us, and how much that subconsciously nourishes this feeling of, I don't need to be special. I can actually, it's nicer to disappear, nicer to be the last one than the first one. Like it's nicer just like put the leaf on the back of the Buddha image rather than on the front. And we know that feels nice, and the joy that we have from sharing a piece of chocolate may actually be exactly that joy that puts us into a feeling of letting go when we meditate in the evening. We have that sense of immediately seeing the benefits on our inner heart, like that we can actually do these things, that even materially and even with like efforts for help or difficult jobs, that we can do them for other people. That really sometimes brings up that feeling of being able to relax when we meditate, being able to open up. I guess it comes from a sense of having made wholesome karma, good karma. It's like good karma. I think it is a good action with full one's heart fully into it, then brings that ease about being able to let go. One feels one is somehow well immersed into a safe, happy mind state after having shared something, and then one can actually not struggle. One can actually simply sit and relax. Whereas the opposite, if we have been kind of unfair or have been doing some things that are say blameworthy, then of course it has karmic repercussions straight away. We have an inner dialogue going on, trying to justify ourselves, trying to spin a story that hasn't ended well yet. And we can't put it down. And of course, then more or less like the meditation becomes a meditation of inner dialogue rather than one of like just simply listening to the sounds of nature, or like simply watching the breath. So this is one of the things, like, of course, like many aspects of daily life things support that kind of common sense selflessness, which I believe all religions have. And I believe the Mother India is rich in lots of charitable practices, devotional practices, practices of like helping and sacrificing for other people. Otherwise, those billions of people couldn't live together in this way. So I do believe like we all have a grounding in this everywhere, and it's a matter of making it conscious as a support factor for our formal meditation. And then there are certain aspects, of course, that we take on from our studies of the suttas. We know very well, like about, like for example, the Anatta Sutta. For example, this is more something for people that are inclined to reflect on the formal teachings. One can very, very easily find bridges to our experience of, for example, old age, sickness, or like being disabled from certain things physically, also that relate to that sense that the Buddha expressed in the Anatta Sutta, where being the experience of not service, an experience of not being able to control things, not being able to order things, because nature is changing, because things are in flux, we cannot tell them to stop. So this is also direct experience, but we see those in the suttas a lot. Actually, I've been also looking through the suttas a bit before the Dhamma talk, but my mind isn't so well organized right now that I can kind of really relate all the aspects of anatta. Of course, they're everywhere in the suttas, in the canon. And even if the Buddha talks about dukkha, or the Buddha talks about anicca, these things are actually intertwined, and it's really so nice to find how we can link them. And then every time we have like made a link, then it can teach us in our daily actions to be aware of this Dhamma, aware of this kind of like aspect of the Buddha's teachings. So the study of like what we do, for example, when we contemplate the teachings, like studying, contemplating the teachings, even chanting the teachings like we do in our traditions, we recite the key passages. Every morning we recite the teachings about the 5 khandhas, like the physical aspects, like Vedana, the feelings, perceptions, and the fantasies, proliferations, sankharas, and the sense impact, sense basis. We can, of course, like observe that, like, and it usually comes up in the practice that in a certain period of time one gets interested in a particular topic. Say it can come from the suttas, it can come from the chanting, it can come from a Dhamma talk or a discussion, or it can come from explaining to somebody else what the Buddha taught, and then suddenly one realizes, wow, this is a real topic now. For example, what is consciousness? What is sense consciousness? And is there another aspect of consciousness? Like it's something that Luang Por Sumedho talks about quite a lot. And there was a talk like 2-3 weeks ago, I think, on one of the questions from our group, like about like what consciousness actually is as being, and boundless consciousness that Luang Por Sumedho talks about a lot, as in contrast to the consciousness of the senses, the sense consciousness. Now I'm hearing something, for example, I'm hearing a whistling sound from the insects, and so I'm aware of that, but like there's a broader awareness. So that can be a real topic that we carry around for weeks and months, or for reoccurring occasions that are suitable for that topic. And we keep that in mind and investigate that. And the feeling of having such a Dhamma background and a Dhamma interest naturally takes us away from acting with identifying with ourselves in that very, say, primordial way of the self or so, because we already know the theory. We're in the process of like analyzing the 5 khandhas by our experience, or trying to see them in action and see how it actually manifests, that the Buddha says like all these are impermanent, all these are not substantial. Then of course it has an effect on us, and we gradually integrate that. Of course, it's not by reading that we suddenly understand Anatta. It has to come in bit by bit through contemplating, investigating, and using it as a topic. And if we then back this up by practical experiences of like being charitable, sharing, letting go, renouncing privileges, supporting people, doing jobs that are hard to do, not thinking, poor me, how come I have to do this? No self-pity. And we step back from these emotional kind of like, say, extras, and go back to the basic teachings. And what's just the 5 khandhas? Or it's just nature. This is just like what happens when you get old. This is not me. It happens to everybody. And we build up a more grounded way of relating to the teachings. And we can use the frameworks of the suttas. We can use the Pali, and we can use the whatever translations we have, and we can single out certain areas that at that moment we are engaged with, and then use that for our real life and for our daily life practice. One aspect that is really quite dear to me, and I think it's maybe not so well spread in outside the monasteries, is the practice of contemplating the body. And being able to just simply physically revert to a feeling of, come on, this is just flesh, bones, teeth, yeah, and this is just hairs, this is just skin, and being able to convince oneself of the opposite that one usually craves, for it being an entity, being an identity, being a person, being somebody who's either good looking, bad looking, or has got like a certain, say, beauty or whatever to him or herself. We can just reduce that by taking it apart into the components. And the 32 parts of the body is one of the chants that we regularly do in the monastery, and it may well be something that needs more explanation for people outside that protect the context of the monastery, to be able just to go inside the body and just to start with like seeing oneself as like anatomically rather than as a finished product, but like just to more or less do a biopsy, an autopsy with oneself. And what we use this for many times is when we feel too much identified, too attracted to either our own body or another person's body. Then we actually use that to crack that sense of attraction. And classically, it's called Asubha Kammatthana. But I personally like to use it much as a non-self practice. And I think it's very much like in line with, what the Buddha taught about, like that, this famous simile of like, there's no real car here. It's just the wheels and the seats and these days it would be the engine or so. Where's the car? It's just the components. You can deconstruct it. And particularly being a Westerner in rural Thailand, sometimes we get so much praise and admiration by people, and it's been my private little trick then just simply contemplate my skeleton and not think too much about it. So if they praise myself or praise whatever I do, then I just think, come on, mere bones. Of course, that's like I'm teaching myself. It's not a full-on reality yet, but it's enough to step back from buying into the praise. And then notice so many times that like here in the Thai culture or like in Buddhist culture, even like all over Asia, it's so much underlying right understanding by the general teachings that actually I think thinking about children, for example, in seeing the school kids in our village, for example, there seems to be much less of a personality investment there than in the modern Western world. And I think it's partly because being in that framework of the Buddha's teachings already, knowing that the most wise person in the world says you shouldn't identify with that. And people then gradually integrate it in a sense of feeling that they're part of nature, feeling that they're not in control of nature. And I'd like to emulate that for myself. That's why I'm so happy to live in a country like this, which is not dominated by that cult around the self. So there are things that we can use for like making ourselves like change a little bit the perceptions. For example, using the body as a source of reverting to the mere facts and components of this is just natural, like this is just like a tool, so to say, and it's functional right now, but like if I rack up my knee, for example, it's dysfunctional, but I don't have to make a drama out of it. I can just see it, yeah, one part is missing. It's easily said, but like we have to develop it further and further, because like eventually all of us will have to kind of surrender to the reality of the body being getting old and being dead at some point. So the teachings are so much intertwined. We can use a particular aspect that makes sense to us and dwell on it for a certain period and test it in the reality of our interactions with the surroundings, with other people, and then always have that backdrop of being in a formal meditation where we can just let it sink in. And just for the 32 parts of the body, I wanted to add a little bit. Sometimes it becomes really complicated, like using the brain so much and thinking about all the little details of the body. I think it's perfectly all right to summarize them as, like, for example, like even like the 4 elements. Just simply see the weighty part that is prone to gravity, for example, the hard part, the earth element in the body, and carrying this around through one's daily life, to one's interaction, and perceiving oneself as this is just earth. Or we can see the more say abstract parts, like for example the heat element, and or like contemplate how the space works in the body, and we can contemplate of course the water element. It's like actually quite fun to think about oneself in those terms, and it teaches one actually about nature. It teaches one exactly that feeling of, yeah, I'm just part of nature. I'm just not better than a dog, basically. Like maybe got different color of my eyes, but like basically the biological matter, mainly water, actually, not earth element, mainly water, I think scientifically. So like to carry these topics around and apply them, and use them, some practical aspects of not falling into the trap of identifying with who we are, who we want to be, what we want to get, what we want to control, which generally leads to suffering. I believe is part of the topic of Anatta. It's not a solid entity here, and it's also not everlasting, of course. So these are my initial reflections. I offer that for further contemplation, and I think we're again well on time. Am I precise enough for a German bhikkhu? So I'd like to end this first session.
So Ajahn, if we have your permission, if we could invite questions from other participants?
Yes, please.
So I'd request everyone, whosoever has questions, to raise their virtual hand, and we'll invite them to unmute themselves. Those of you who are not comfortable doing so, you please feel free to type into the chat window. You can type into me, Deepti Kedawat or Aranya Vihara Trust as the host, and we will call out your questions. We may have to curate some questions, of course, depending on how many are coming in. But to start with, we have a question from Christopher. He'd written to me a few minutes ago. So Christopher, if you'd like to please ask your question to Ajahn.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Bhante. You talk about sensations, Vijnana sensations. So sensations arise from Nama Rupa, right? Because if there's Nama Rupa, there's sensations. So this is a hypothetical question. In the absence of the five senses, will Tanha arise?
In the absence of the senses, will Tanha arise?
Because Tanha arises because of the five senses, right? Because, yeah. So if it's a hypothetical question, of course, we human beings have five senses. But so the question is, in the absence of five senses, will Tanha arise?
Yeah, if you don't, if you count, well, okay, I'm not sure, but like I would say that Tanha is a faculty of the mind.
Yes.
And Tanha is a craving. It's linked to the five senses, of course. And like we can barely imagine a world without those five senses. But my understanding is that at the end of life, actually, we will be deprived of like those five senses. Like we'll be deprived of the physical body, and yet I do believe that the Buddha taught that these the mental qualities will find a new life to abide in. So it's very difficult to answer this exactly without having experienced this. But I believe it's a question about what happens when you die, basically. If as long as there there is tanha or was tanha at the moment where we can still speak about, then there's bound to be a future process in motion. And and this is what I believe leads to the next life. I hope that's in line with the Pariyati Dhamma. I'm not so skilled in differentiating with all the pitfalls of the fine points of these questions, but I do believe like it's a question about like what happens when you die. Actually, the five senses are gone, and there is no more sense of like physical interaction, but like the mental force of like craving to be, craving to not be, and sensual desire, they're still there. They haven't been abandoned. Otherwise, it would be very good. Like it would just like we'd all kind of just die and pass away and finish. And then there must be something beyond the physical.
Yes, of course, we will only know when we die. That's for sure. Because for now, we can't know. Now it's just purely theoretical about theory and how we think about it. So, sorry, moderator, I have one more question. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, then that leads to this question. Since you talk about self and non-self, right? I think this is a very complex idea because self and non-self is the basic fundamentals of Buddhism. Non-self, which we call it Anatta, right? So then this leads this question in Dinga Nikaya, DN 28. DN 28, DR, okay? It states about a being that this being is about whether he comes into the womb knowing, unknowing, if you have understand what I'm trying to say, something to do with like he descends into the womb unknowing, stays unknowing, reborn unknowing, or descends knowing, stays unknowing, is reborn unknowing, and descends knowing, stays knowing, reborn unknowing, and finally, yeah.
Honestly, I can't follow that right now. I'd suggest that you just write this to me, basically, because it's something I have to probably read and ponder upon.
Yes,
it's like,
all right.
It's too spontaneous for me to answer to that. I'm sorry. Yeah, fair enough. But like, you're welcome just to maybe send me that question, and then I'll maybe inquire if I get the time to look it up, and because I'm not such an expert, and it seems to be a very refined point. Or can you say it just in your own words, basically? What was the point?
Oh, which means the being here, being coming to the womb. What comes into the womb? Isn't it the soul? Because something goes into the being.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay,
yeah,
so we
goes
just don't,
into the womb.
I would say just very agnostically, we just don't call it soul.
Yeah.
But we do believe that something exists in a next manifestation of a full being. This is like a general understanding of like that there is rebirth. There is the round of existence is like is a reality. The Buddha had these insights under the Bodhi tree, like realizing what he was, who he was in past lives. And so also he saw how the law of karma then actually works. And possibly one of the things that the Buddha himself had special knowledge about how the actual process works. But I don't think it's described in a very detail, and it would probably lead to quite a lot of confusion, because it's just like you use the word soul, it's kind of like already again something very this worldly. It's very difficult to say. We cannot really imagine the fine points of what happens when the body actually isn't there anymore. And so I hope that like the mental dispositions of trust and a feeling of wholesomeness will immediately be apparent when the physical reality of the body isn't there to drop back on, that this will guide us through the process. For example, when we're skilled in letting go in our present life already, then we'll be able to, at the end of the life, be aware of this process without fear, anxiety, and further like complications. because we already trained to let go of the, say, realm of the physical body, the senses, and so forth. And so I trust that this will manifest with a pure heart, that we train under these difficult circumstances. We train this a pure, you can call it heart, even though I don't mean a form like this. Like, I also don't say pure soul, but like with your pure awareness, with your your inner purity, like we'll be able to trust that this will go in a good way. If we are challenged by old age sickness, I believe that we can then be peaceful and let nature take care. Whereas, like, usually, say if we die with a sense of self in mind, for example, this is funny. Actually, when Steve Jobs died, there was a famous, actually quite a strange sect in Thailand, saying that he was reborn as a yaka in the areas of, like, please forgive me for you know, shouldn't name names, but like it's not too like that. But that was the picture book idea. He was reborn as a yaka in Silicon Valley because he was so attached to his old company. He had this, yakas are the guardians, the bosses of the, so these are icons. So, what do I want to say? I want more or less like if we have certain identifications and we're not able to drop them at the end of the life, I'm pretty sure they will exactly manifest as we preconditioned them. And it can be states of fear, it can be states of like fame, it can be states of like, but also of loving kindness, or it can be states of like when, if we have trained ourselves to let go of the material work through meditation that goes into the absorptions, for example, we might not have to come back to a physical world. There's like all the refined states in the Anagami world, for example. These are images for gradual letting go of the sense of self. And eventually, if we are so much able to let go from this physical identity, then we would parinibbana like the Buddha, which I hope that at some point, after training life and life and life, we'll actually be able to get there. Maybe not yet, there's remainder, so we get the results of that, life after life. But just to let go and not identify right now is the main thing. And the specifics will work themselves out. I fully trust that we can just kind of let go then, and that's it. We let go, let death take place, let nature take place, and then we don't actually have to worry what to do. Like, this is a feeling of trust, sattha, faith that we have developed in this quality of peace that we can already sense in our present life.
Okay, now I'll invite Tony for the next question.
Greetings to Bhante. I hope all Bhantes and Ajahns in Wat Pah Nanachat is well, and good to see you again. My question. Hello? Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I cannot see you, but never mind. It's a technique.
Yeah, if you still remember. Okay, yeah. My question to you is, I'm 28 right now, and almost every day I've been thinking like, who am I and what's my strength? What can I do to contribute to society? But notice that all these questions contains the word I or me. So I've been thinking like, what should I do next and what's my future? So it's a question common to all the 20s. And my question is, since this class is about anatta, it's about non-self, then should I continue to ask myself those questions, or should I just let it go and let it be? And, you know, because right now it's the time for finding directions and in life. So if I pursue anatta, which is selfless, then will I lost myself altogether? So, yeah, that's the question. Thank you.
I think I can relate to that because like making decisions, for example, what you need to do next in life and what's the next stage of your own, say, development in work, in studies, in business, and then in family life. These are really important things, and so this is the level of practicing on the conventions in a way that is correct by all means, and following the recommendations of the wise people, for example, with precepts and the general feeling of like already implementing ideas of charity or letting go and being able to put the Buddha, the gold leaf on the back of the Buddha rather than the front, so that life becomes less complex already. We try to reduce our engagements in certain areas, for example, fun, amusement, or needless, like say whatever online activity or so. We can just actually cut down quite a lot through restraint already. But like on those things that are essential for running a family, running a business, getting your education together, I do believe that actually a lot of things actually turn out very, very more precise if you every now and again take a step back and just have a pause from it. This is like what I always feel for myself as well. Like I can get caught up in the monastery business and arranging this and that quite a bit. If I tell myself, okay, just have a pause, just meditate for a while, change atmosphere, do something really only for yourself. If I'm too restless, I might walk around the monastery, and you might do some sports or whatever is allowable for lay people, playing music or so, something that isn't more clutter in your mind, but like is semi-meditative or fully meditative. So I believe that if you sacrifice a certain part of your time to doing nothing, it will pay out. Put it like this: like it'll pay out in that it gives one a more say relaxed state of mind in drawing the right conclusions, what needs to be done next. It's similarly to when we meditate, say, for half an hour or 45 minutes. Be very disciplined to say, in these 45 minutes, I'm not going to make plans. In these 45 minutes, I'm not going to think. But trust that after those 45 minutes, you'll be waking up again and you'll be able to think more clearly. You'll be able to use the causes and conditions of the next step with more of a relaxed mind. So it's a question of not one or the other, but it's a question of the right mixture. And you will have to try for yourself. Say, if one is in a very difficult situation, for example, family crisis, or I believe for many people the lockdown situation is very difficult. So there may be really quite a few periods where one does experience a lot of dukkha and does experience a lot of unsatisfactory pressure about like decisions to be made, impossible scenarios and so forth. But we also know that like there is light at the end of the tunnel. We can actually trust that this is also not going to last forever. And we need to adapt in the time of like being under stress, under extreme worldly stress, so to say, to find intermediate ways of calming down. For example, instead of like saying, I'm going to meditate for a full hour now, maybe it's good enough to do 15 minutes or to do some chanting where you using a reflection of another context to just for a change of atmosphere. And or like I said, like I mentioned, sports. For many people, that's a good compromise. Or for myself, like sometimes I do some work. I just kind of do physical work, and I don't have to think much. And afterwards, I can think better. It's in a one way, it's quite similar to meditation. We take a time off from that very big challenge, and then trust that the creative mind afterwards is so refreshed that we can solve our problems. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Ajahn. It does make sense. And please send my greetings to all Ajahns in Wapanana chat.
Great. I wish I could have seen you, but because like it's dark on my screen, it just says Tony. But at least I heard you.
Yeah,
okay.
We met in January. Oh, sorry, March.
Yeah,
March.
I know. Yeah. Okay.
Ajahn, next I would invite Henry to ask his question.
Bante. Hello, Bante.
Yes, okay, I see you.
Yeah, I would like to ask Bante about this Anatta.
Yeah.
Okay, in your experiences or your insight, could you share with me your experiences? How do you experience this Anatta, and how you train yourself to get this insight or experiences? Could you share with me?
Yeah. Okay. I must say I'm very content with little glimpses of Anatta every now and again, and I try to spot them. This is part of my practice, is trying to spot these experiences. It's not saying that I'm there and I have an Anatta experience that I can freely distribute to everybody, because that is very, very advanced state of practice. But whenever I feel a sense of relief, just simply surrendering to the surrounding, to the circumstances, a sense of letting go, a sense of not having to withstand with my whole weight of like who I am, not with putting in my personal investment, then I sense a sense of relief. So the feeling of Anatta is a very peaceful feeling. And I do believe, like in traces, it occurs much more than we are aware. It's just part of our delusionary thinking. We're conditioned to constantly look for the other, for the self. If we are training ourselves in the opposite way of recollecting the sense of, for example, being part of nature, being part of like a chain of cause and effect, where we can just simply be, then these moments have a certain taste to them. They have a certain sense of peace that one can feel, and also uplift. And I'm sure everybody who has started meditating and has started practicing the Dhamma has some experiences of one way or the other of that feeling of like not investing a sense of, I gotta make this work, I gotta be the one. But like rather the opposite of being, so say, kind of in this very trusted cushion of everything's all right. I can just sit back and relax and let things happen. And this is, for me, is an Anatta experience in that sense, that one isn't taking control anymore. So in my practice, what I'm looking for is to link all these various little pieces of Anatta that one feels when one surrenders to a situation, to get a more continuous backdrop for myself, that I don't fall into the traps of holding on.
Yeah, could Bante names a few examples, your own experiences?
Yeah, for example, a sense of being not satisfied with a certain programs. For example, we're forced to do something in the monastery that I didn't want to happen, and I can't get out of it, and I possibly am even responsible for it. Didn't kind of like manage things in time, so I suffer intensely, and I got this feeling of, this can't be, I should stop this. I should immediately, how could I do this? I kind of get into a critical mind all around me. Why did I let this happen? Why am I here in the first place? I should have gone, I should have said. But then usually after some time, hopefully quicker with every experience, I get into the mode, never mind, just let it be. It won't help if I say, how dare this happen to me? How dare I not prevent this? So like then, for example, it could be something like, example from my time working in Wat Pah Prong, and you're there on in a context where basically you're surrendering to what the Sangha says and what the teacher says, Luang Por Liam, for example, and he may bring you into very, very unpleasant situations, for example, pouring rain, quite cold, pouring concrete out on a work site, and you think, I didn't ordain for that. I don't want to be there. I just want to go away. And I should have said before, like, can we stop the work then and then more or less, but there's no chance. I feel cornered. I can't get out of the situation, and I experience suddenly, so what? I can let this go. I can just go with the flow, go with the experience. What have I got to lose anyway? I just step back from the opposition of, I don't want to do this, and I know it'll be over at some point, and I know actually I'm in a good context of sila and in the context of virtuous people. I'm not doing anything unethical. So that surrender and letting go of like the feeling of rebelliousness, I think many of us have known this, like in periods, like say, for example, you made a wrong choice or so, took the wrong underground line or so, and you think, how can I get out? How can I get out? And I'll be late. And actually, this is just like about oneself, about the drama of being caught in a situation that one can't change anymore. But once one then drops back to the sense of, never mind, it's not about me. There were causes and conditions, perfectly all right. I don't have to justify this. I can just kind of sit there smiling. I can just close my eyes and say Buddho until it's over. Then you get a different relationship to that situation. It's a relationship of surrender. So to summarize, like these periods of personal surrender, of like doing impossible things in a way that one actually can smile about it in that moment. I think we can link them bit by bit to be able to more swap to that mode of not rebelling out of that sense of pride and ego against things that aren't what we wanted to. So does that make sense? Like the point would be for you and everybody to find where we have experienced this situation of surrender. It can also be in a formal meditation retreat. Say, if you have done a more formal meditation retreat with like lots of like, say, clear-cut schedule, you're not allowed to just get up and you're not allowed to have a like break in between. You have to be through the whole session. You're actually practicing that sense of surrender. Sometimes you don't have to surrender because you're blissful already, but many times actually we have to kind of overcome that sense of rebellion, sense, why did I sign up for this? Why did I? Next time I'll go to another place, or yeah, like that sense of rebellion of like, me doing this is ridiculous. And this many times comes up in meditation that we think, okay, gotta let go of it. And then when you let go of this, then you actually have a model experience of how it feels. The power of having surrendered your investment of self to the situation is a liberating one. And then sometimes it becomes quite tangible. And then to recollect this, I know I can do this in other situations. This is practice of Anatta, practically, I think.
Okay, thank you, Bhante, for your advice.
Ajahn, we have a question which is about, one is practice of anatta by oneself, but also in relation to others. So the question is from Lim, who's saying that, thank you, Ajahn, for the great lesson. As I practice and reflect on anatta, people start to notice that I enjoy less on sensual things like holidays, meals. I still enjoy them, but I don't express my enjoyment as much. I don't crave for it as much as I used to. I have them, it's fine. I don't have them, it's also fine. So how do I continue my practice without putting off others?
Okay, yeah, I can also relate to that. I had that very much actually in the period before I joined the monastery. I also felt like, so a bit like that sense of like filtering things and practicing restraint and naturally not being interested in getting carried away, and also not having that feeling of I need to identify with, for example, when you go to a certain restaurant, you go to a certain movie, you go to a certain holiday. For Germans, it's a big thing. Where did you spend your holidays? You have the stories to tell. If one practices over time, these things do become really meaningless, and the whole social context of like presenting oneself in that, like once it's gone, like actually there's not much to talk about. Like for example, remember Luang Por Liam going to America for the first time, and then I wasn't part of that, and Ajahn Jayasaro wasn't part of that, but like I was part of Ajahn Jayasaro going to pay respect to welcome Luang Por Liam back to Wat Pah Pong, and Ajahn Jaya asked like Luang Por Liam, so how was America? Luang Por just said, just natural. so there wasn't any great, wonderful, it's the best thing I've ever seen. It's just natural. And then the next question, well, Luang Por, didn't you like those big redwood trees? Wasn't that fascinating? The answer was the redwood trees were just part of nature. So it wasn't meant like an affront, like just putting Ajahn Jaya or me on the spot, but like I think it really comes from the feeling, yeah, okay, I went to this place, it's like this. It's nothing that I feel I have to kind of like celebrate now. It's just like water down the bridges somehow. And then so for people like that halfway are living in the context of society, sometimes this sounds odd. We maybe fear that we're a bit alien to things, and or like stigmatized. And people were, for example, thinking in the last year of my university time, basically, I'm a bit odd basically because I want to spend my time sitting in front of a Buddha image. That it wasn't so much about the brand name Buddha image, but it was more about like he's not coming out for going for to the movies anymore. He's not like into cycling anymore. Basically, I had the feeling of like I just want to simplify my life. And what is a good measure whether this comes from a feeling of genuine love for peace and inner happiness, or whether it comes from a forced way of like more or less moralizing to say oneself, one shouldn't enjoy the senses, one shouldn't be engaged in worldly things, or whether it's genuine is when it feels like a sense of fulfillment to be alone, or a fulfillment to retreat, or a sense of joy in, say, for example, offering the opportunities to somebody else, for example, rather than taking them for oneself, or like possibly even boasting or identifying with them. So one can make a little bit of an exercise to one, like look into oneself of whether one actually is feeling happy about it, and whether when there's a sense of contentment. If it comes from contentment, then it's fine. If it doesn't come from contentment, but it comes from a sense of like, I shouldn't be doing this because the Buddha said sensual pleasures are dangerous, then maybe one is reaching for the stars and is a bit too much on the level of, depriving oneself of the necessary, say, joy of life, that like on that level of practice is normal. For example, if you see children, it's normal to smile and find them sweet. And unless you're an arahant, if you look on the floor and sense that's just nature, the normal reaction would be just like, oh, sweet, what's your name? How old are you? And things like that, just to play along with that in a natural way. And that sense of not pretending to be too strict with oneself is also important. So that comes from a real sense of contentment. And if one feels one is possibly discovers one maybe a bit too strict with oneself, which I hear is sometimes a side effect of even Vipassana meditation, like not saying Vipassana is a brand name of Goenka, but like generally insight meditation in the West, mindfulness, sometimes it has the side effects that people feel aloof and negative around the world. So then I would say alarm bells, actually, if there's negativity with it, then I would say the best way out is to do something charitable, do something for others, use the time that one is frugal with oneself in offering to somebody else, and go back to the level of dana and generosity and feedback, and laying the foundations of a wholesome livelihood before renouncing too much that it becomes a sense of self. The word is self-deprivation is quite a heavy one, but there are traces of that every now and again. So to summarize, like a sense of inner content, if it feels naturally fulfilling to not go to the movies, not to watch TV shows and so forth, and it brings one joy, and one rather likes to whatever read the suttas or like do some chanting or so, then it's fine. But if it becomes a program that people notice one is a bit odd now and doesn't seem happy, then the way out of that trap for me would be suggesting to do something for other people and seek that generosity aspect and punya, like building merit, as a backdrop for not falling into negativity.
Thank you, Ajahn. The next question is from Sue. She says that how to meditate on 32 parts and on the 4 elements.
Okay, so the 32 parts, I think, is an extensive list, and it's just a few parts of the body that the Buddha singled out for whatever reason. Possibly at that time it was the knowledge about anatomy was like this, and there's other, say, kind of like parts in the suttas that are highly conditioned by what was available as an analysis at that time. For example, the list of illnesses in the Girimananda Sutta. These days we would include other illnesses. So in the 32 parts of the bodies, if you like, you can also include other aspects. For example, you can think about the ear, the nose, or something like that, or like the arm, or like whatever the certain, yeah, like for example, the stomach isn't in there, for example. You can add the stomach. And there is a list of somehow exemplary parts of the body that we can just go through in our mind and envision them. That's how I would start, is envisioning, sending my awareness, sending my mindfulness to those parts, either as where they are located. For example, you can easily choose the hair of the head if you have some, or like hair of the body, you can choose either the beard or like other parts of under the arms or so, and then just like visit those and get a feeling for what is their characteristic. And you can do that for a long time. 32 parts, like if you even just go for them, each one for 2-3 seconds, it takes a long time. So it's already a kind of mental exercise to stay with one task already. And even though one may not fully get through everyone, it doesn't matter. The idea of being focused on certain aspects that are not the way that one usually perceives them, that already has an effect. And there naturally will be some areas of the body that are feeling more accessible to oneself than others. And others maybe don't even make sense. For example, I found it difficult to contemplate bile or something like that. But I can if I invest time in it. And I can easily contemplate the skeleton, for example. And in fact, that's many times the most common one that people end up with contemplating. So if one goes through the list and finds certain areas that are more intuitive and attractive or interesting for one, then it's fine to rest on them and explore them further. Or like take a subgroup, for example, just go until the flesh of the body and skin and flesh and bones, and then start again. And leave out the fluids and the organs or so. And so whatever subgroup one takes, the main thing is that one is engaged with trying to experience them. And experiencing doesn't mean only to locate them, but like to think about or like contemplate any aspect of these parts of the body. For example, the bones naturally are dry and they're a bit like charcoaly, or like chalk, white bones, for example, or whatever associations we have. And we then imagine those in our body as we are thinking about what are their characteristics. Classically, we can revert to like saying, okay, this the bones are earth element. We know from the Satipatthana Sutta that we can imagine certain parts of the bones, we can imagine them crumble, so we can play around with them. So it's a very, very big area, a playground for contemplation. And I do think it needs to be playful in order to have enough creativity in order to experience some of the more hidden aspects in oneself. And whether the 32 parts of the body, as we experience them while going through some of them, actually are in line with reality, or whether they actually anatomically look very different on an X-ray or MRI would look completely different, doesn't matter. It's important that we get a relation to, this is part of my body. This is different than what my outside experience or my experience of this is me is suggesting, so that we somehow get new perspectives on certain aspects of our body through a creative way of looking deeply into what does it actually feel like, what would it look like. And it's fair enough to mention is that, like, once one gets very engaged with one part, for example, it may well be that one then rests on that, and then actually what comes up could be a samadhi nimitta. You could actually start seeing things like suggesting themselves to your mind in an unsolicited way, like as if you had a picture of these, like that was shown to you. So I'm not saying that this has to happen, but like it's like why many times actually in the classic scriptures the 32 parts of the body are also considered as a samatha meditation object, because you can also kind of dwell on these and enter certain more abstract areas of the experience, and then just let go of the particulars, and then and it can also lead to samadhi. So wherever it leads, like in the most important part is to just kind of have that explorative interest, and then keep with it, and then and let them unfold. And then if the time that you have dedicated to it is over, then you might be able to carry on, like taking an imagination of your skeleton, for example, all the way to the bus station when you go back to your workplace or so. Or like when you see other people, just to play around with say changing the perception. This is some of the tricks monks do when there is sexual attraction coming up. We imagine seeing the skeleton, for example, which is not disrespectful. It's just a part of like reality that usually we overlook, that actually everybody has a skeleton, and we just don't pay attention to it. So does that answer or give enough thoughts for at least starting a little bit with that contemplation? I would refrain from using it in that in the context of lay life, being bound up with a lot of like duties and a lot of like diversity of experience. I would refrain from judging them as unbeautiful. I think if the idea of asupa, unbeautiful, unattractive, comes, it will come naturally. But to teach oneself to see, so to say, the loathsomeness and the foulness of the body, I think it needs a special protected area and needs more of a context of the livelihood, being in a safe and well instructed context, rather than being at home and being prone to certain possibly not so favorable conditions, and then this could be actually bringing about bad mind states, which is like it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be uplifting to see the unbeautiful in the seemingly beautiful. So like rather not take it as a contemplation of the unattractiveness of the body, but just as an exercise in deconstructing the sense of this is who I am, look how great I am, but just seeing oneself as part of nature, and then suggesting using particularly the elements like earth, water, wind, and fire to kind of get a feeling for what this body is made of. So that's. Are we already 2 minutes before the end?
Yeah, you've shared so many nuggets with us today, and really, bringing it close to our day-to-day lives and so many practical examples. It's been more than helpful. And I'd just like to now, so that all of us would like to thank respected Ajahn for this wonderful session. So I'd request Anishi to lead the Anumodana on behalf of all of us.
Andamayam Dhamma Kathaye Sadhukaram Dadamasi Sadhu 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 Anumodana.
And I would like to chant a little blessing for all of you, like expressing my appreciation for your love of the Dhamma, and wishing you all the best for the practice in circumstances that maybe aren't as we are used to, and that may you all be free from suffering and rise up to the occasion of letting go and liberating the feeling of like having to be suffering from that from everyone's experience. Sabbha-buddha-nubhavena, sabbha-dhamma-nubhavena, sabbha-sankha-nubhavena, buddha-ratanang, dhamma-ratanang, sankha-ratanang, thinnang-ratananang, anubhavena chaturasiti sahassa dhamma kantha-nubhavena, pitaka-taya-nubhavena, Chinasavaka-nubhavena, sabbete roga, sabbete bhaya, sabbete andharaya, sabbete upadava, sabbete dunnimitta, sabbete avamangala vinassantu, ayuvadako, dhanavadako, sirivadako, yasavandako, malavandako, vannavadako, sukhavadako, otu sabbata dukkha bhaya vera sukha santu chupadava, aneka antaraya pivinassantu jate jasa, jaya siddhidanang labhang sodhi bhagyang sukhang balang, siri ayuchavanno cha bhokang buddhi, jaya sawa satawa sa cha ayu cha jiva siddhi bhavantu te, bhavattu sabbha mangalang, rakhantu sabbha devata, sabbha buddha-nubhavena sada sodhi bhavantu te, bhavattu sabbha mangalang, rakhantu sabbha devata, sabbha dhamma-nubhavena sada sodhi bhavantu te, bhavattu sabbha mangalang, rakhantu sabbha devata, sabbha sankha-nubhavena sada sodhi bhavantu te.
Sadhu.